Network.
Thank you for joining us. This is Rispa Abraham with Anchor Network, where we bring you conversations with ordinary people doing amazing and extraordinary work in our community. Today I am joined by a gentleman who is going to tell us what he does, how he does it, why he does it. But before we go into the details, let's get to meet him.
Anchor Network.
Yeah, my name is Robert Miano. I'm a team leader of an organization we call Delta Financial. It is licensed financial professionals who are making a big difference here in the U.S. by educating people about building generational wealth and also avoiding probate. I'm an attorney licensed here in Texas, also licensed in New York, and also licensed as an attorney in Kenya. I'm also a licensed financial professional.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
You mentioned the word probate, and you pretty much took me into one of the things that I've been very, very interested in.
Yes.
I have seen you in a lot of community events,
Yes.
and I see the services that you provide to our community. One of the things or the challenges, we don't know what is probate.
Yeah, so probate is the process through which someone's assets get administered by a court when they pass on. So essentially what happens when someone passes on is that everything they own, money in a checking account, a savings account, a house, everything gets frozen by the probate court.
Okay.
And it's a very expensive process, very time consuming, and it's governed by state law.
Okay.
Meaning that if you have assets in Texas, like here in Texas, and assets in Kenya, there will be multiple probate processes.
Okay.
And that's why we advise people to avoid that probate process as much as they can.
So we can avoid the process. It's not necessarily a must that every person who has passed on, they have to go through probate.
Yes.
How do you do that?
Yes. So probate can be avoided mostly in three ways. Number one is you can avoid probate by having something called a trust.
Okay.
And especially for what I call your illiquid estate. Okay. Illiquid estate is essentially like your real assets, like a house. So you avoid probate of your house by having that house owned by a trust. Number two, when you have liquid estate, like cash, we always advise people, instead of having cash in your bank, you can put it in something like life insurance. Okay. And once you have your money growing in a cash value life insurance, that is going to avoid probate.
Okay.
The last one is what we call index annuities. Annuities don't go through probate. It's going to be an arrangement, it's a legal arrangement, where somebody is entrusted with property and uses the property for the benefit of another person.
Okay.
So you'd have three parties. So you'd have the person who creates that trust.
Okay.
So it could be RISPA creating the trust.
Okay.
And then you'd identify somebody called a trustee. And a trustee is the one who calls the shots and manages the trust.
Manages the trust.
Yes. And then there's going to be somebody called a beneficiary.
Okay.
And beneficiary is the one who is entitled to money coming from the trust.
Okay.
Or what we would call income coming from the trust.
Okay.
So in most cases, it's going to be parents create a trust. So we call them settlers or grantors. They still serve as the trustees. But then they name their kids as the beneficiaries.
Not everybody has children.
Yes.
What happens in such situations?
Yes. So even if somebody doesn't have children, they can still create a trust.
Okay.
They can still create a trust. And the reason I say that is because, so long as you identify who you want to benefit from the estate, the beneficiaries don't necessarily have to be children.
Good.
So we even have people in this country who create trusts, what we call charitable trusts, because they want maybe needy people to benefit from that trust.
Okay.
We have people who form what we call a special needs trust, because maybe they want people with special needs to benefit from the trust.
Okay.
So it can be anybody. Anybody can create a trust, whether they have children or they don't have children. What we always tell people is that avoid this probate monster as much as you can. As much as you can.
When is the best time to start thinking about I need to have some arrangements in place just in case anything happens to me. Do I need to wait? Okay, I have made my 1 million. Now I definitely need to have a process in place to avoid probate.
So I always say that the best time to avoid this probate was yesterday. So everybody, everybody getting this information needs to take action.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because as a community, we are way behind. We are way behind when it comes to matters concerning avoiding this probate process. I'll tell you that even something like life insurance, most of our people don't have even life insurance. And when they have it, they have term. And statistics are telling us that people with term insurance have a 1% chance of getting paid. There's a company called Zebra that quoted Penn State University that was saying that 99% of term policies don't pay.
Okay.
So most people don't even have life insurance, leave alone trust. And that's why we always advise people that come up with a plan to avoid this probate process holistically.
Okay.
And don't procrastinate. Because one of the biggest concerns we have within our community is saying that I'm going to create that trust maybe when I have $1 million, maybe when I have even $50,000. So it doesn't matter how much you have. Whether your estate is worth $20,000, come up with a plan to avoid this probate process.
To avoid the probate.
Put your family first. I always say that a family is a going concern. So come up with a plan to avoid this probate as much as you can to make sure that your beneficiaries can enjoy and continue enjoying your assets even when you're not there.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, you mentioned two things. Term insurance.
Yes.
Let's break it down again, simple, stupid.
Yes.
What is term insurance?
Yeah, so a term insurance is an insurance for a certain period of time. It could be 10 years, it could be 20 years. So you only covered for that period.
Okay.
That period lapses, that policy does not exist anymore unless you renew it.
Okay.
Unless you renew it. Now, the reason why we bring that up is because most of our people have this. Now, the issue that we have seen in the market, and big time, even during probate processes, is that if you take a cover for, say, 20 years, statistics are telling us that because of inflation, if the inflation rate is, say, 4%, it loses about 56% of value over that 20 years.
Wow.
And so if somebody has a term policy, they carry it for like 20 years. At the end of 20 years, has shed so much in terms of value.
And so much in value.
Yes, and that's why when we do this estate planning, we are mostly using permanent policies and using trust. And that's exactly what Rockefeller did in 1934.
Oh.
Used a permanent policy and a trust and created generational wealth.
In our community, you find that families, they don't have, all members of the family do not have the information around the probate process.
Yes.
What advice would you give to couples on the importance of having, one, the probate conversation, and two, making sure that we have this set up early enough, and if the children are mature enough, to make sure that they are involved in the process?
It's a good question. So they always say that two things are certain.
Okay.
Death and taxes.
Okay.
But it's possible to avoid taxes through planning.
Okay.
But it's not possible to avoid death.
That
Death
is
is certain. So no matter how we think about it from a cultural perspective, death is certain. And so that's why it's important to have these discussions. Because if we don't come up with a plan, then we are putting our families in jeopardy. And so it's important for couples to come together. And even if somebody is not married, even if you're a single parent, it's important for you to put a plan together. Because if you don't put that plan together, then the government is the one that will intervene.
Puts the plans in place for
exactly.
you. Yeah.
A judge is going to be making decisions as what is happening. And by the way, one of the reasons why we tell you avoid this process is because during the probate process, creditors get paid first before your beneficiaries. Before your beneficiaries.
Okay.
And so somebody has to make a decision as, do you want Capital One? Do you want Wells Fargo? Do you want those institutions where you have debt
to be paid first?
To be paid first
Before your beneficiary.
Before your beneficiaries and before your children.
Yeah.
Yes.
But if you had the trust in place, then your children are protected, or your family is protected first before anybody else.
Exactly.
Some people may argue that I already have a will.
Yes.
Is that good enough?
A will is never enough.
Okay.
Because a will goes through probate.
Okay. Oh.
A will has to go through the probate process.
Uh-huh.
And so we always tell people, a will is never enough. And number two, a will can be challenged. A will can be challenged.
By who?
A will can be by anyone. There's even a case in court in New York about another, it's in public information, about someone who passed on, and somebody from Tanzania claimed to be a son to that person.
Oh.
And even say that he left me with a will. And that's why we tell you that avoid probate by coming up with what we call non-probate assets.
Okay.
And the non-probate assets is what I mentioned. A trust, life insurance, and index annuities.
We also talk about the cultural impacts.
Yes.
Where we come from.
Yes.
This was never a conversation. And sometimes people feel like, oh, if I start putting these things in place, I'm going to die tomorrow.
Yes.
How do we navigate ensuring that we are protecting our family, we are protecting our assets, and then reconciling the cultural aspect of it?
Yeah, yeah. So they say that when you go to Rome, do what the Romans do. When we come to America, we also have to embrace what these Americans are doing to build generational wealth. Just today, I can tell you, I had a client of mine who came here and told me that, look, my estate is worth about $6 million. And I already have a trust. In fact, he told me he has what is called a dynasty trust.
Okay.
He has a dynasty, and I can talk about a dynasty trust in a minute.
Yeah.
He has a dynasty trust. So the same thing, when we come here, we need to change our mindset and know that for us to set up our kids, ourselves, our families for success, we also have to embrace some of these concepts.
Okay.
And think about how we create these instruments. Remove this mindset of, I'm going to go and buy a plot in Isinya, in Rumuruti. Embrace.
What's wrong with a plot?
We're going to talk about that in a minute. Because we have to think about our future. We're going to think about our future. You know, remove this mindset of, if I set up a trust, if I get life insurance, I'm going to die. No. We're going to think about how can we set up ourselves for success.
For success.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we are here, let me tell you, we are here in Dallas-Fort Worth. Dallas-Fort Worth's economy is 5 times larger than, for instance, the economy of Kenya.
The economy of Kenya, yeah.
And so we have to succeed here. This is home for us. Let's embrace this as home.
We have to marry the land.
Exactly.
Dr. Utiso.
Exactly. We have to marry the land.
Yeah. We have to marry the land.
We have to marry the land.
We live here. We are marrying the land, as we have said.
Yes.
But many people still have property outside of this country.
Yes.
Kenya, for example.
Yeah.
Property that you had before you moved here, or property that you've acquired after you've gotten here.
Yes.
But we also have family.
Yes.
Who are still there, and in many ways, one way or another, they're going to be part of that trust process.
Yes.
How do you navigate that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So, as I mentioned, probate law is state law.
Okay.
And so if you have assets in Kenya and assets, say, in Texas and Minnesota and New York, it's important you come up with something I call a multi-state plan.
Okay.
Or others would call it a multi-jurisdictional plan.
Okay.
So, for instance, if you have assets in Kenya, you need to include those assets as part of your plan. And the reason is because if your kids are here and you don't have a concise plan, guess what? Somebody's going to lose those assets to their family members back in Kenya. So, for instance, you have brothers and sisters, you are sending them money via Wave. I always say that if you have kids here, and you don't come up with that plan to make sure that those kids get your assets in Kenya, those same brothers and sisters in Kenya are the same people who will take away your assets away from your kids. And that's why you need to come up with a plan and have it in writing. Have it in writing. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is it something that I can do by myself, or do I need to contact somebody as yourself to help me put it in place?
So the trust itself is a legal document. It's a private document.
That means I need a lawyer.
You need a lawyer for that.
Okay.
And we always advise that in coming up with this plan, think about being comprehensive as much as you can.
Okay.
And what do I mean by that? I have seen people come to me and say, I want to create a trust. And you ask them, okay, what do you own? And they will tell you, I have a house, but it's on mortgage. Can I have a trust? And I will tell them, yes, you can have a trust even if your house has a mortgage.
As a mortgage.
But we need to think about how we avoid probate and foreclosure at the same time.
Foreclosure at the same time.
Yes.
Okay.
Because just because you own the house through a trust does not necessarily mean that the bank cannot go after your house.
After your house.
Yes.
Okay.
That's why we advise you that also have life insurance at the same time.
Okay.
Because that way you avoid foreclosure, because there will be money that goes to pay off the mortgage
That pays off
when
the
you're not there.
mortgage if you're not there.
You're not there.
Okay.
Yes.
Anchor Network.
And once I have this document in place,
Yes.
who should know that I have a trust?
Oh, that's a very good question. That's a very good question.
I can have a trust and I put it under my bed and nobody knows about it.
That's a good question. So, a trust is a private document. So you don't get to file it with the government. So, for instance, you form a trust under the Texas law, there's no requirement to file it to the Secretary of State. So we always advise to embrace this digital economy. I call it the digital economy.
Okay.
So one of the companies we work with, some of the companies that we work with, would say that when you create an estate plan, we're going to provide a platform where you can store the estate plan digitally.
Okay.
And that's why I'm telling you that thinking about these documents holistically is very, very important. So don't keep it in your mattress. Once you come up with those documents, don't keep it in your mattress.
Yeah.
Think about having this cohesive plan and embracing, technology as
Yeah.
part of informing your beneficiaries.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I can embrace the digital economy.
Yes.
But maybe the people in my circle have not done that yet. Do I need to identify maybe my sister, my brother, my best friend and say, hey, if anything happens to me, go to Mr. Miano.
Yes.
He has a document.
That's a good question. So we always advise, number one, when you have an estate plan, nowadays, you don't leave your documents with your lawyers. It used to be traditionally that the lawyers were the custodians of the estate plans. Nowadays, we advise people, we empower people to take advantage of technology, as I mentioned, so that you are able to inform your beneficiaries.
Okay.
So, for instance, if your relatives are in Kenya, we always advise it's good to inform them. Come up with a plan, not only just about a trust, but about even your assets. Nowadays, we say that let's not be secretive about what we own.
When somebody goes, that's when you know they had 20 acres in Isinya.
Exactly. Or somebody buys a secret plot, they don't even tell their spouse. Somebody operates a secret bank account, and their families don't know. So it's upon us to also be transparent. Because these legal processes can only work if you are also transparent with the people you love.
Okay.
And so it's important for us to also be transparent, because I've seen people who own land and their spouses don't know. Or people, like you mentioned, somebody may be single and their relatives don't even know what they own.
Okay.
Let me mention something about even somebody single. In this country, under state law, if somebody is single and they don't have beneficiaries who can be identified by the states, their assets would revert to the states. And a doctrine we call as cheat.
It is interesting.
Yes. Their assets would revert to the state. And a doctrine we call as cheat.
Okay.
So we tell you avoid probate, foreclosure, and as cheat at the same time. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
My single people out there, I am available to be named as a beneficiary. No, jokes aside, I think that's a very important point that you make.
Yes.
Because while couples may make plans for their children
Yes.
or their significant others,
Yes.
we have a lot of people who are still single and
Yes.
and they are doing well.
Yes.
It's always nice to have a plan in place.
Yes.
If not to a family member,
Yes.
there are many charitable cases that can benefit from that instead
Yes.
of that going back to a government entity.
Yes. Yes.
So
I totally agree with that.
That's a very good point.
Yes.
Let's go back to the trust documents.
Yes.
Can these documents be revised?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
So you can create either something we call a revocable trust
Okay.
or an irrevocable trust.
The difference?
Now, the difference is a revocable trust can be revoked, can be changed anytime. An irrevocable trust cannot be changed in most cases unless a judge is involved.
Oh.
A judge is involved.
Okay.
And so that's what we tell you sometimes when you're creating this trust, it's important to know what are you trying to achieve?
What are you trying to achieve?
What are you trying to achieve?
Okay. What are some of the situations where you would need to do an irrevocable trust?
Oh, that's a good question. So, we always recommend irrevocable trust, especially for physicians, like plastic surgeons, because plastic surgeons are going to get sued 3 or 4 times a year.
Is that so?
You're going to get because they go and botch somebody's nose.
Another story for another day.
They get sued 3-4 times a year. And so they need to go an extra layer in terms of protecting assets.
Okay.
But for most people, we always tell them that having a revocable trust is enough.
You get married, the two of you, you have a trust,
Yes.
then child number 1, child number 2, and then you need to do all these updates. At what point do you need to make those updates?
So when we design a trust, we provide for afterborn children.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
We provide for afterborn children. We would have a clause in there that says that the property shall go to the children equally,
Equally.
whether alive at the time the trust was prepared or not.
Okay.
And so that will make sure that even for the children who are born after the trust is set up,
They're still protected.
they are also protected.
What are some of the things that I need to be able to make sure that I include in the estate planning process?
There are the documents involved in the process. So, for instance, we always advise it's good to have something called a guardianship agreement.
Okay. And what is that?
So, guardianship agreement is to say who will take care of your kids in the event of your death or incapacity.
Okay.
Have that document in writing. And then you can say that that guardianship agreement would be supported by money coming from life insurance.
From your life insurance.
Yes, yes. We also always advise having something called power of attorney.
Okay.
And a power of attorney is a document that will say, in the event of your incapacity, who will be able to access your, say, bank accounts.
Okay.
Yes. So you always advise it's good to have them at the same time.
So you need to have a guardianship agreement.
Yes.
And a power of attorney.
Yes. And you also need to have something called a living will.
A living will.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What is a living will?
Or a living will, you know, nurses and nurse practitioners would hear them call it an advanced health directive.
Okay.
Yes. It's a document that would say that if you found yourself needing medical treatment, who makes those decisions on your behalf?
Decisions on my behalf.
Yes. And you put that in writing.
Okay.
Yes.
So a living will
Yes.
is very different.
Exactly. Last will and testament. They are very different. The wills that we usually recommend is a living will and another one called pour over will.
Oh,
Pour over will.
I never heard of that.
Pour over will. Okay.
Yeah.
So a pour over will is a document that would say that once you have a trust and you acquire assets in future, and those assets have not specifically been designated in the trust,
Into the trust.
and the matter goes to probate, the judge can only rule one thing, that those assets that you acquired will only be paid to the trust.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like an automatic default of your assets into your trust.
Exactly.
Oh,
Exactly. Yeah.
I learned something new.
You learn something. That's why we're here to share information.
Exactly.
That's why we're here to share information.
Definitely. We definitely need to learn to share this information.
Yes.
Okay.
You see, the good book says,
Uh-huh.
our people perish because of lack of knowledge.
You are the second interview to quote that.
Yes. So we want to make sure that we are empowering our people with knowledge.
With knowledge.
And they know as much information as they can. Yeah.
No, that is so very true, and that is the reason why we are having these conversations.
Yes.
Because in our community, we have a lot of people doing amazing work.
Yes.
We have a lot of people who have a lot of information that can benefit our communities.
Yes.
There are resources out there
Yes.
that people can use to change their lives.
Yes.
But you don't know what you don't know.
Yes, I totally agree.
If we continue having these conversations,
Yes.
people will get the information. An informed community does much better than when people don't have the information.
I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you.
Is there another document that we need to know when we are considering estate planning outside of the ones we've talked about?
We need to sensitize people about a document called final disposition.
Okay.
And final disposition is a document that would say that I want to be buried here. I want to be buried in Kenya. I want to be buried in Tanzania. I want to be buried in Congo. And you put it in writing. And who would be the one to do that?
To do that.
Yes.
What is the difference between that document, the final disposition, and
So a will is a document to bequeath assets.
okay, it
To your
has
beneficiary.
nothing to do with where I'm buried?
It doesn't have, sometimes you have a will, a part of a will, say where you're going to be buried, but it's a final disposition sitting within a will.
Okay.
It's a final disposition sitting within a will.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Always advise it's important to have it as a separate document.
Is it an expensive process? Because I think some of the reasons why some people, we avoid some of these things. One, lack of knowledge.
Yes.
Two, is cost.
Yes.
Is it an expensive process?
It's not expensive.
Okay.
In fact, estate planning is one of the most affordable processes.
Okay.
And so we always advise people that the first thing is, first of all, get the information like we are sharing. And then number two, take action.
Take action.
And you take action because you have to think about your future. We have seen cases where somebody has worked so hard. You work every day. Every day.
Yeah.
Yet 1-2 hours sitting down and coming up with a plan would change the entire course of your generation.
Course of your generation.
Yes.
Thank you so much for this conversation. These have been very, very, very enlightening.
Yes.
We have been talking to Robert Miano, attorney at law. Any parting shots?
So my parting shot is, let's take action. Let's embrace generational wealth. As I said, when we come to America, let's do what others are doing. Let us set up our kids up for success. And let us embrace this concept of coming together as a people and building generational wealth, because this is what is going to make a difference to us and our future generations.
Thank you for joining our conversation today. This has been Rispa Abraham with Anchor Network, where we bring you conversations with ordinary people doing amazing work in our community. We thank you for having us, and thank you for inviting us to your space.
Thank you so much.
Thank
I really
you.
appreciate it. This has been awesome.
It has been awesome. Thank you for the information.
Sure.
A network of ordinary people creating extraordinary impacts.